Today is day 3, and we have heard the views from the peace prompters, the pioneers, and also we got a male perspective the last 2 days that we had. And today we introduce to you our creative forces. Do women in the arts have a voice? How do women navigate spaces where there are cultural barriers and various norms that you have to adhere to? How do these women speak through their works and become champions of change while inspiring others to move with them? How do we get out of that box of being objectivized and subjectivized? So today, at this Cargills International Women's Day Festival of the Changemakers, we are seated here in this very artistically inspiring property, Lake Lodge by Tharu Villas, which with my digital program, Kaleidoscope with Savithri Rodrigo, is collaborating for this one-of-a-kind festival. So just to tell you, next week is our final day of the festival. We will be having the positive disruptors, again, 2 sessions. The first session is with a panel of young startup females. Achala Samaradivakara, the co-founder of Good Market. We have Himali De Silva, also the co-founder of Ape and Collab. And we have Randula De Silva, who is the founder of Good Life Generation. And also, our session 2 brings on 2 males who have disrupted the comedy space, Gihan Block and Dino Carrera, primarily because we wanted to find out what it is like for them to work and what they have learned in their comedy areas about women. Because some of the time they do don women's clothes, they play women's roles, and what is it that has gone into them actually taking on those roles, what lessons they have learned. So we thought it would be good. They've also disrupted the comedy space in a big way, so it would be good for us to have a chat with them as well on our last day. So there are what we might call our showstoppers. I want to say thank you to Cargills for coming on as our festival title sponsor. Thank you ever so much, because that support has been immensely valuable in getting this 4-day festival to get it along. And then we have UNFPA as our event sponsor. Our exclusive radio partner is Light 87, and we always have Blessy and Lloyd here with us. And thank you for coming here and for all the publicity you have been giving right throughout. To all our media friends who are here, thank you so much. Without you, we would never have been able to get this festival, give the festival the popularity it has gained. To Healing Island, our wellness partner, and if you got those pouches, you would find a pack of very handy sanitizing wipes in them, ideal to keep in your handbag, and that the horrible, having these little bottles of sanitizer is completely done away with those sanitizer wipes. Thank you very much, Dila, for your very generous gesture. And of course, we have kissed. You will be enjoying some very exciting drinks today made with kissed, as well as some of the wines that will be accompanying the canapes. Coconut rum mint is one of the drinks you will be having. The coconut rum mint smash, which is with house-made coconut rum and kissed sparkling lime, and grape iced tea with kissed absolute grape juice. So, let me introduce to you our panelists today. Starting from my left, your right, I have Layla Gonaduwa, an interdisciplinary artist and Pro Helvetia Swiss Arts Council residency winner 2020. She embarked on a unique 3-month journey across Sri Lanka as part of this residency, and she's an extensively exhibited interdisciplinary artist with an aesthetically emotive, cathartic practice that deals with politics of perception, memory, and ecology. Right next to me, on this side, is Amina Hussein, who's the author and co-founder of Pereira Hussein Publishing House. She's published 1 novel and 2 collections of short stories. Her non-fiction book on the 14th century Moroccan traveler, Ibn Battuta in Sri Lanka, was published in November 2020. And Thaji Dias, principal dancer of the Chitrasena Dance Company, which is one of the oldest and most prestigious dance companies in Sri Lanka, established in the 1940s by Guru Chitrasena. She is the youngest granddaughter of Chitrasena and Vajira. She's performed to international audiences and at festivals around the world, also one of 2 members of the Chitrasena Dance Company to perform in its first international collaborative with world-renowned Nityagram dance ensemble, and that was called Samhara, which was performed in London, New York, and India. So, on with the show. Thank you very much to my panelists for being here. And let me start with Layla, although the question goes to all 3 of you. How have each of you navigated your creative space in the context of gender bias and the general perception that women in the arts, that's performers, artists, even writers, but maybe more performers and artists who are, for instance, is always battling reputational risk or being objectified?
So for me, and for many artists, I mean, art is an extension of ourselves. So we are laying our, innermost thoughts and ideas and, views out there. So basically, it bears yourself. And, as a woman, it can be judged differently, definitely, because, men can tackle most of, from nudity to anything. But women, when they tackle these subjects, there is definitely a different perception of you. So, so it is a very, what shall I say, you are practically bearing yourself. There is expose to your innermost self. You can't be an artist and then go home and be someone else. It is you out there, in whatever medium you, deal with. So you have to be bold and brave and basically navigate through this. It is tough. It is tough.
And Amina, maybe you can just add to that.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Savithri. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be part of the Cargills Changemakers Festival. So very much in line with what Layla said. In fact, when you first said, Savi, maybe writers to a lesser extent, I thought I agreed with you. And then suddenly I thought, when we put our words on the written and published page, there can be many people who write and who keep their writings to themselves. You are out there and you have said certain things. Like I remember with my first book, 15, it dealt a lot with sex and with lesbianism and with bold women. And I was really naive when 15 was published because I thought, okay, the book is out there and I'm this anonymous person, nobody knows me. Very quickly, people are like, who is this woman? Oh my God, what is she writing about? And a lot of people believed in Sri Lanka, because Colombo is also very small, they don't understand the word fiction. They think everything is truth. So I remember when, for one of my lesbian stories, somebody said, oh, this is her personal experience. She has gone through this before. So it was very unnerving for me at the beginning. But now you develop a sort of a thick skin. But as a writer, I do think a lot about before I put it on the page, especially if it's to do with history or religion. I do a lot of research. And if I've read it somewhere, but I've been sloppy in my research and not documented where I got it from, what page, who said it, very sadly, I've had to take it out. And it's happened to me twice. So next time I do something based on research, I will be this exemplary researcher.
But doesn't that sort of curb your natural creative instinct?
So I'll speak about me. When I first write, I just write. And it's a purge, virtually. So actually, my first draft is very bad. Because it's everything. It's like all the, maybe all my biases, all the grousers, it's certainly not objective. And that's where I have an editor who, my first meeting for the Ibn Battuta book with the editor, he didn't even bother making a single red note. He just said, take it back, remove the I. We don't care about you. No one's interested. So you have to accept a lot of harshness also.
Thaji?
When it comes to a creative space, I think artists have to have the freedom to create whichever way they want, but it's not necessarily for us. I feel like we're trying to socially or politically bring out a message, or I think as creators you should be able to do what you want, and even if it's a simple story. So it's not, when we're creating, we're not consciously kind of saying, okay, this has to be socially relevant or politically. But I mean, there's always a kind of moral or something that comes out of it. In terms of, I think, reputational risks, I think for me, the norm was, seeing these women in my family before me who were like doing this full time. So that was the norm for me. So I saw my aunt and my grandmother, my cousins, my mother, they were all a part of this, and they were all these strong women, and working and rehearsing and then balancing their family lives, and so that was really the norm for me. So I didn't really see anything beyond that. So I kind of naturally got into this where it was like this female driven. So it's all the women in the family kind of working, so that's what I kind of got into. But I mean, definitely I understand that it's not the same for everybody.
What about public perception of a dancer, per se?
Yeah, I think it just depends on how you choose to do it. For me, it's always, people ask me, is it possible to do this as a profession? That's the most common, question that's, asked from me. But never, I've never been, asked if, it's something demeaning, or because I think it's in the way that it's a lot to do with the way that my family kind of did it, and the kind of respect they gave the art form, and the respect that they gave the other people or the other artists who worked with them. So it's a lot to do with that. So I think I kind of got it from that, got it easy. Yeah, because of that, there's a certain way that I think people look at what we do with a lot of respect. So.
Right. So, Layla, how comfortable are you, or do you have support from males in this art sphere? How do women actually navigate their space?
Well, when you talk about support, I think on one hand, I think there are more artists who are recognizing that there is definitely a disparity. Because when you look at the numbers, the females that are eligible for university and the ones who enter the fine arts stream, 75% eligibility, almost more than 50%, I would say, enter. But then it is a handful of artists who really practice and engage in art after they leave university. I think when you talk about males, whether they help, I think there is more help now because they recognize that, that we also need to be given that equal opportunity. But there is this general perception that women come with a lot of baggage. And that is because of the multiple roles that we have, which is true, because we have multiple roles to fulfill. So artists just, it sometimes falls by the wayside, or sometimes it is a struggle to engage in, because being an artist, you really want to be that. You have to daily engage in, something to do with art or, whatever that is. So, so there is that. But I think on the whole, the problem could be cultural as well, because what I see is the women who pass out, they go back to their villages, or they go back to this system. They even leave their art behind, which is done in a very liberal atmosphere in the university. It is a liberal act. So they sometimes, most of the time I would say, they even leave their work behind, because they don't want to take it back. Because the people around them, either they don't connect with it, they don't relate to it, and they can't understand it. So it is a struggle for women. So this is understood now. And, but speaking to some people, it is strange, because the numbers lie. You can help 5 artists, and if one person makes it, and you can help 5 female artists, and then you can help 15 male artists, and 2 people makes it. So when you think of the percentages, it is not, 2 males made it and 1 female made it. It is like how many people you actually promote. So this conversation has been happening within the groups that I come to contact with. I don't work with any group, but I speak to artists from all sorts of organizations. So there is definitely a disparity in, like, say, you take those 15 males and you will still give them an opportunity. You will still allow them to participate in a lot of things. But the females, you don't. That acceptance is not there. So, yeah, I would say it is getting slightly better. But at the same time, I don't see a great change happening right away. But it is going there.
Right. So, Amina, literature cannot be the business of a woman's life, and it ought not to be. That's what Poet Laureate Robert Southey said when he was given one of Charlotte Bronte's manuscripts of poetry. What is the 21st century woman writer like?
I think a lot has changed in the interim. So today you have, it's really funny, but now writing is seen as an appropriate avenue for a woman, because it is, especially in a conservative country like Sri Lanka, it is quiet, it is solitary, you can do it at home and look after your children. I mean, the popular perception, I have none of those things. So, so I find as a publisher, there are a lot more female writers who send me manuscripts than male. Very inspiring stories. The first book we published for 2021 is by Rukmini Artigala. And she actually, it's her first collection, and she's 85. And it took her that long. She always wrote, but it took her that long because she worked full time, she had children, and then, she may have thought that, okay, now in my retirement, at 85, her retirement, very inspiring for us, she decided to write this collection of short stories, and she got published, which is quite an achievement. I think while a lot of women may write, what they may write about, or what they can write about, or what they are maybe it's appropriate to write about, are very different from what a male might write about. So there was this book that came out called Chucking the Dragon some time ago. It was about a heroin addict based in Sri Lanka. I read the book and I was amazed by it, but I couldn't find the author. So it had been published under a pseudonym, and I was told later that the author was a woman, but she never wanted to be known that she had written the book.
It goes back to your story of people not being able to separate, or readers not being able to separate you as an author and the story in the book.
Yeah, and also because you're quite right. So maybe it was her story, I don't know. But she did not want any flack from it. She didn't want to answer any questions from it. She just wanted to put the book out, and maybe that explains why she wrote it under a pseudonym.
Thaji, in Kandyan dance specifically has been, or historically, a male-oriented dance genre. For women who dance in that male dynamic, is there a change in technique when you dance as opposed to a male dancing a similar step?
Yeah, so a little bit about Kandyan dance. It's a male dominant dance form, and it was even today the ritual is only performed by males. So my grandmother was one of the first professional female dancers in Sri Lanka, and so when she started dancing, there were a few other females who had already begun dancing, but not professionally. So I think she was, really supported by my grandfather to do what she wanted to do. And really, even if she didn't, she would have just done what she wanted to do. She's still like that, even at the age of 89. But for her, she is a very, she has a lot of, we call it lasya, which is feminine, grace in her, which is very inherent in her. So when she started doing this male dance form, she really brought that feminine grace into the form, which is what a lot of us females follow today. But if you have seen my aunt dancing, she's a very masculine dancer. And so I feel she's, it can, be different for different people. I think I'm yet to figure out what I am, male or female. But it's, for her, I think she saw my grandfather and grandmother dancing together. So she took what suited her body from whatever she saw from my grandmother and from my grandfather, and created her own style, so which was very masculine, and it was like fire on stage to see her dancing. So it can differ from person to person, but I think my grandmother kind of, for herself, she kind of established that feminine quality, and also brought in different movements that would bring out that feminine aspect in the form more.
And Amina, your stories have a way of defining or bringing out the characteristics of women, even if they are not the protagonists of the book. Ibn Battuta, for instance, you are talking about this 14th century Moroccan traveler, and you also bring in the nuances of how he was accompanied by slaves, and there were women who traveled. Again, those are asides. Some of those are just asides. Women travel. Then you bring in your grandmother or your great-grandmother and how they also traveled alone. Is there a reason that you do this? Because it does not necessarily, it adds spice to the book for sure, but it does not necessarily need to be there. But is there a reason that you bring in these, the female nuances into your books?
So the reason I brought it into Ibn Battuta was he brought it in. So he loved women. And so he was always observant about when he saw women. He was struck by, because he came from an intensely traditional tribal country, and that was also Muslim. So when he traveled through countries where women were given a lot of respect and treated equally by men, he marveled at it. And he actually says that. So for instance, when he came to Turkey, he was surprised that the Turkish king would stand up when his wife came, and first she had to be seated and then he would sit. That doesn't happen in the Muslim world. So I was struck that he brought in women, and when we think of the 14th century, we actually don't think about women at all. So to find so much of women, you know, Far Eastern princesses who were hosting banquets that he refused to attend because she was not a Muslim. Then she calls him and says, why didn't you come? And then he impresses her, saying, you know, you're not a Muslim, so I didn't know how you would prepare the food. So then she gives him live geese and goats and all so that he can do it his way. And then he meets this woman who is fording a river. She nearly drowns. He mentions it quite casually, not as if it was exceptional, which made me realize, why don't we know about women in the 14th century? It's because either no one bothered to write about them, and they didn't write about them, or if they did, we don't have their manuscripts or their word that exists today. So that's the reason they came into Ibn Battuta. Why I write about women, mostly, my next book might be from a male perspective, is because number one, I am a woman. Number two, I'm a woman. Number three, I'm a woman. My whole landscape, my whole world is colored by that fact. And I like to think I'm a kick-ass woman. So I want to portray kick-ass women because I don't think I'm the only person around. So that's the reason.
Good for you. Now, would that mean a change in the way you think? If you're going to write it as a man, or in that context, how would you change your entire demeanor?
You mean if I was writing a male protagonist? I mean, so I'm a stalker. I just look at men, I listen to how they speak. I can see some people are very uncomfortable, but that's the way all writers are eavesdroppers, they're stalkers, they're thieves of other people's lives. So for a long time, my friend said, we're not telling you anything because what we tell you might come in a book. But it never comes immediately. It germinates for a very long time. So my protagonist I've been thinking about, because the older I get, I want to read about older people. So he may be 60 years old, and so now I look at 60-year-old men.
I hope it's just for the book. Layla, do you also get inspired by watching people?
That's hard to say whether I get inspired by watching people, but definitely if it sort of fits what I'm going through, because I was thinking of your question whether males help me. They do help me when they become the subject matter of what I do, and in that context. And it's funny, that question again. Let me go back. I do have males helping me simply if I don't have the physicality of doing certain work, or if the work is too toxic and I don't have the skill to do it. And the people who help me just happen to be male. It is not that I've chosen them because they are males. It is I choose them because of the skill, and that skill is going to basically affect my work. So that is the only reason. Do I get inspired by males? I don't know. Sometimes I don't think of, the gender if I'm on a certain subject. And sometimes, they might happen to be male.
So what the question I actually really was wanting to ask you was, you work with a lot of heavy material.
Yes.
You cut wood, you bend metal, you use all kinds of things. And your current work and the work that you're working on right now, and also a few pieces from the past, are very heavy. And it takes a physical toll on you. Have you ever wondered about that? Have you ever wanted to sort of get some help in, or has it taken a toll on you physically?
I really enjoy the physicality of it. If I'm kilning, I do work with, heats that are like 1,800 to 2,000 C. So, and then if I'm cutting metal, yes, it does take a toll on my hands. I can't think of giving it up. Very heavy work, yes, I've, looked for help. But perhaps I can, because I'm an interdisciplinary artist, perhaps I can change the medium, how I'm going to translate it later on if I feel that it is taking a terrible toll on me. But so far I've kind of managed, and yes, I've had allergies to all sorts of things happening to me. So,
right. Any questions from the audience? Anyone who would like to ask any of these three ladies in the creative arts? Anyone?
Hi, ladies. I guess this question is for all of you. How important do you think being artists is right now with the current state of affairs of the country? I feel that artists can contribute so much in their respective spheres with perhaps peace and reconciliation and bringing out some of the more important issues that we are facing as a nation. If you want to speak based on your own art form, that would be awesome.
Thaji, would you like to start?
Well, for us, I think, yes, it is very important to use art in this time to heal, and that's what we do. That is what dance is all about. It began as a healing, and we continue to do it even on stage as a healing for people. But I think for us as a company right now, it's about also helping out the artists themselves, because we have a lot of artists who are really struggling, artists who really depend on the rituals to earn their living. And for us, it's right now also about helping them, because what we do is actually an extension of what they have brought forward. So if they do not exist, we as stage performers will not exist. So that's why it's, for us right now, that's the main focus on trying to help those artists who have actually paved the way for us to come here. So.
Amina?
Thank you for the question. I feel especially writers of the creative world have a pivotal part to play. But, so my first two collections of short stories were all about the war, both JVP and the LTT conflict. Moon in the Water had a little bit, the novel, but you cannot force something. So because writing is a creative process, it what grips you, it what you want to devote your attention to. I will say for the Ibn Battuta book, because all the while I was traveling within Sri Lanka, it struck me that my encounters were so multicultural with all the people I met, and the situation that was happening with the ethnic tension, I will say, between the Sinhalese and the Muslims this time, did not play out in my travels, that I felt I needed to put it in my epilogue. What happened was, in the afterword, while I had written it and it was in editing, the Easter bombings went off. So I had to take out that, and it really shook me. The Easter bombings shook me as a Muslim more than anything else that had happened, because the conflict, the 26-year conflict was there. We were in our 20s when it started, and basically it becomes part and parcel of your life. I worked in human rights. It infiltrated into my writing. But this came, for me, maybe I was totally blind, from nowhere. And so I told my editor, I need to rewrite my whole afterword. I need to put this in of how much and he said, but you're going to date it. When you put this, then the book is dated by what? I said, it doesn't matter. I want to put it in. So I rewrote the whole afterword, and it came in. Now, look at where we are now. We are having now even more tension. And I thought about it when you have this abaya ban, the burqa, not abaya, the burqa ban, now the niqab ban. I thought, now, what should I write about? Because the other thing is, writers are not a monolith. We all have our different thought processes. And it's a very complex and complicated situation to be in, where you might think a particular way, and then you think, but actually, if this is what the hardliners are also thinking, maybe you should step back. Maybe it's not the time to say these. And then sometimes you find it is never the time. It happened with MMDA, with the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act. We wanted change to come from within the community. And we wanted, and there were a group of young, dynamic, amazing, admirable lawyers and activists who were trying to get it done, but they couldn't do it through the community. And then you have a Buddhist monk, a parliamentarian, whose motives are extremely suspect, I will say it. And what do? You're caught in the middle because you wanted the change, but did you want it this way? So I'll just leave it at that.
And Layla, maybe you can also bring into Blessie's question, you can also bring in your experiences when you were doing your journey facing Maha and what you learned in that time.
Okay, let me speak about facing Maha in the context of your question. Definitely, I think artists do have a platform to, weave in their political stance, but it has to happen organically. Now, when it came to facing Maha, traveling around, I was basically interrogating this, the migration from humans to, in an ecological sense as well. So these words like alien or non-native. So I thought a lot about it, and I started really thinking about those words and how it is applied. And that sort of seeped into my work, where sometimes a person not from there, because that is what we say, not from here, can contribute a lot. And sometimes they just disappear into the system. Sometimes there is subversiveness in the system. So all that went into the work. So I am handling things like concepts like alien and non-native through my work. And I know sometimes, though it is through an ecological sense, when you look at art, it all depends on how you perceive the work and how you kind of, take it forward and how you kind of act on it, in a very individual sense. So yes, I think most artists, their work is political, though we might not necessarily think so.
Any more questions we'd like to? Yes, since I looked at you rather.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for what's been really interesting so far. I'm not a woman, so please excuse me. Don't you think that in the current context of what's happening here, the creative space is squeezed for everybody, male, female, or whatever? So perhaps, this is something I want to ask all three of you, perhaps by the very fact that you mentioned the fact that women are not seen as sort of under the radar, and not really out there that much, maybe women have a bigger role to play in a time when creativity and space and freedom and expression is suppressed for everyone. So I'd like your thoughts on that. Maybe you have a bigger role to play than previously.
I think creativity anyway can come out in different ways. You don't necessarily have to be an artist. It sort of permeates everything you do. So from your thinking to how you engage in something. So we do, I would like to think that most artists have a wider worldview and we are more open to things. So where women are concerned, I'm sure they do contribute in, within their, family or in their social and I would say in their group in a very creative way. But at the same time, The problem is that if they want to go a bit further, the help is not there. Sometimes it does come from your family or your community itself, but it is difficult to find. But I agree with you that it is a limited space for everybody, but I don't agree with you when you say perhaps, I don't know whether you meant for women, it is a very small space, because it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Like I want my art to be judged on its, content, its skill, its, on that level, on a I would say, a equal platform. And it is unfortunate that we have to have these gender platforms, but that comes because of, years of, not having that, that support. So, yeah, it is unfortunate.
Thanks, Kumar, for your question. I would say in two ways. I think people look at subjects in a different way, individually. And so everybody's view is legitimate. Even a racist's view is legitimate. Even a religious, someone who is religiously chauvinist is legitimate. But just as much, then, everybody else's view has to be legitimate and has to be respected, and they have to have the freedom to say what they have to say. In today's climate, I feel that is lacking. More than the men and women divide, it is what you're able to say, what you're not able to say. That the sad story of the Mana poet who wrote in Tamil, it's really a sad, tragic commentary on our society. So you have this poet, in case you don't know about it, who lives in Mana and who published a book of poems. He published it in Tamil. Now, he is virulently anti-ISIS and anti-Wahhabi. So he had written a poem about how in Sri Lanka we all have to live together and we can't be going into these movements. But unfortunately, he or his publisher had chosen to put a picture of an ISIS fighter next to the poem. So when this book got published, some official got hold of it. They thought that he was encouraging the youth to go towards Wahhabism and to become an ISIS fighter. Immediately they arrested him. So first, as usual with anything, they arrested him. Then they got the university to translate the poem. Now anyone knows when you translate, you don't do a word for word, especially in poetry. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of insinuation. And so the people who translated it did not understand it, and they said, yeah, he's telling young people, y'all should become ISIS fighters. So I will understand if any minority writer, creative, painter, dancer, Tamil or Burgher or Muslim will think 100 times before they say anything, because such is the climate. That is a climate we have to work within, and we have to try to combat and try to make others see also what is happening through our creativity.
Thaji?
Well, I think for us in the dance, a huge problem that it's not necessarily a problem, but something we've always had is the pioneers in the field have always been male. So not just dance, but in music or in drama. And so there's that social perception that, oh, this, male figure. So it's always been, even now, even though my family, there are more females in the company right now, but there's always that thing where when we try to do work, it's very difficult to move out of our own space and work freely. because there's that perception that, oh, these pioneers are all male, and so I think it's also the way that people see it that would, I hope, change with time. So I think after my grandmother started dancing, it's somewhat been easier for all the females who kind of came into the dance to start creatively bringing out their ideas and working with other males in the same field. And so I think, and I hope with time, that more females will actually start creating in the field.
Any other questions that you may like to ask?
Hi.
Right at the back.
Hi, my question is to Layla. This is connected to the answer you gave to Savitri's second question. You said something about the numbers, how many people make the decision to go on and sort of pursue their dreams to become successful artists. After university graduation, there's a significant number of people who just give up that dream, right? If I understood that answer correctly, that's what you said. So my question is, how much is that to do with gender and society's perception of gender and what each gender is supposed to do, and how much of it is actually financial?
I won't say it's financial, because if it's financial, it affects both male and female. Most of them do come from outside Colombo. So what happens is most of them get married to sometimes people within the university, their fellow friends, and they go back, and there is a conscious decision that the male will take on the artist role. And that mostly comes from the male side, not from the female. And the female is very, I would say, meek and docile when it comes to those decisions. They take on the nurturing role. But now I do understand that we are, naturally, we take on that nurturing role. But having said that, when you look at people that I speak to and I come to contact with, and I do come to contact with a lot of artists from outside, they're struggling to find the time to even engage in art activity, because they have so many other things to do while supporting their husband to be an artist. When it comes to single women, also, they prefer to go into teaching. The highest number of female graduates go into teaching, and they don't practice art at all. So it is very discouraging, actually. The numbers are not great when it comes to females.
Anyone else who has a question or two? Layla, you mentioned single females who are in the art space. You've been there, done that. How did you find the time?
I'm still being there, doing
still
that.
There. How did you find the time with children pursuing art as a career, which in some cases may not be as lucrative, or be able to? How do these women, you and other women in your sphere, how do you actually manage financially in a very almost a volatile situation?
Yeah, that's a good question, Savi. I'm born in Colombo, so that is my privilege. I'm exposed to a lot of things. I didn't have a rich family background or anything like that, from a very low middle class family. But I was determined to, pursue my work. Now, let me give you just an example of one of the work that I did decades back. It was called My Water Pot. I had 2 children, and I was a single parent. So the first thing on the fire is this water pot. And I would, wait for it to cool down. I would filter the water. The last thing on the fire was also the water pot. So between those 2 boils, I had to manage my day. And it was a very regimented day because I had 2 children, very active children, heavily into sports. And if something didn't happen the way it's supposed to happen, the whole day falls through. So now art is not something, art is constant. It's constantly, within you. It's not something that you can choose a time to say, okay, I'm going to be inspired during these 3 hours and I'm going to create. It simply cannot happen because even while you're talking to your children, your mind wanders off. My children reminds me of this, by the way. So, this work, my water pot, what I did was I crushed my water pot. And then I did a work which was, which got quite a bit of recognition within the art world. It basically interrogated motherhood and your art practice, or what you are struggling against. So I had, speaking about myself, I had a very regimented, not a few years, I would say a good 10 years. From a particular time to a particular time, I decided I'm going to do art. Now, art came not just creating. It could be reading about art. It could be watching art. It could be thinking about art. But it was a conscious decision to be engaged in something to do with art. So you need to be really disciplined if you have all these other multiple roles to play to pursue art. So I did that for years. And, of course, now both my children have left house. So now I have the freedom to do art anytime I want. But yes, it was a very regimented practice and it was difficult. So I would think that particular work, actually I called it 15 minutes because 15 minutes was the time that it took for it to reach boil. It took another 1 hour or so to cool down, but I called it 15 minutes. So that was a very, that's the work that comes into mind when you speak of that. So you have to be disciplined. You have to want to engage in art. And yes, things get easier.
Amina, in similar context, the ups and downs that you have been through life, what has that done, or how has that changed you in the way you write? How do you manage writing in those times?
So as Layla says, you don't decide to become creative. You don't say one day, I'm going to be an artist or a dancer or a writer or a poet. It is this, what can I say? You can't explain it. It grips you, and you have to be it. You have to write, you have to paint, you have to dance. Otherwise, you're not living, you're just existing. So I began writing in secret when I was a student in America. No one I knew had been a writer. All the writers I read were white people, mostly men. But you want to write. And I would write in secret. No one saw me write. No one knew I wrote. I first wrote in a book. Then I graduated to a computer. And even now, it's because I work in the publishing house as well. And it's a lot of work dealing with other people's creativity. Sometimes I think my creativity suffers a bit because as an editor, you're so invested in the work that you're dealing with. It takes a lot out of you. But I remember when doing the Ibn Battuta book, I would start work at 9 o'clock after dinner, and I would work straight till 2 o'clock in the morning. This was otherwise I thought this book will never come out, People are getting sick and tired of saying what has happened. How is Ibn Battuta? Where is it? This, that. I felt frustrated because, so like Layla said, I devised a regime. Only once in my life, I'm 56 years old, only once I had the luxury. I had got married to Sam. We had gone to Switzerland, and I said, Sam, I want 1 year not to work. I just want to sit and write. And I was in this beautiful country, Switzerland, and I actually wrote. But it's a flip side is part of where I get my inspiration is from people, meeting people, coffee. So I had to get back to work. I realized it was not enough just sitting and writing. I needed to feed off what was happening around me. So then I had to get back to work, and then I find I'm far more productive when I'm doing something else. Then it feeds into my creativity.
So Thaji, something that Amina said, she feeds off the energy of people. During COVID, you did not perform. How did you get that energy to carry on?
Well, when you're a dancer, you just have to do what you have to do to keep your body going. Even if there are people, there are no people, you just have to keep yourself motivated. So even though there was no performance in sight, and it was getting very frustrating, but I knew that this phrase that my grandfather used to always say, that he always said, when you're a dancer, you just have to keep your body in tune all the time, like an instrument. So that just kept ringing in my head. Even if I'm going to be performing in another year and a half, I have to be ready to perform. If there's a performance tomorrow, I have to be prepared. So I knew I wouldn't be seeing anybody. I wouldn't be seeing our drummers. I wouldn't be seeing my teachers. But I think being alone, also there was something beautiful in that. Because sometimes when you're at the dance school, there's a lot of things happening. And then I kind of tried to find a bit more peace at home, and just try to work differently and find motivation in a different way, because I just had to keep going. So yeah.
Did you also dance in the shower?
Well, sometimes.
That's what I thought. Layla, just one last question before we go to the concluding one. In your travels, what have you learned about women in general, especially in this last period when it was during COVID? You did a single journey almost across the country. So what have you learned in that time about women? Because you came across various segments of society.
Yes, I did. I think women are resilient, they're hardworking, and they might not be they might not earn more than the man, but whatever they earn go directly to their families. And especially, in a lot of areas, I won't say especially, the males, 50% of their income goes on alcohol and to finance companies. They are completely in debt. And these are things that are not necessarily what they need, but they would like a trishaw, they would like a bike, they would like a phone, and millions of data cards. This is what they spend on. Whereas a woman earning half that would, spend it all on the family. So when you think of the amounts, it's the same, 50% to, person who. So yes, I think women are very, hardworking, and also I found that they're very curious, curious about me as well, wherever I went. They would ask hard questions, and they would be inspired. They would be inspired in the fact that it is possible to travel alone, and it is possible to stay in not, 5-star places, but in, normal households and kind of, do your work. And they see that passion. So there's something really nice that happened to me in Ibagamua. This trishaw driver I was using for 2 weeks, it happened so that his sister had passed out in archaeology. So I was so thrilled. I really wanted to meet her. And I went to their house. And but she was getting married, and she was thinking of, I think the husband was some sort of an engineer, but she was going to stop. But after being with me, because I used her also, to get about and, talk to her, when I left Ibagamuwa, she was going to continue. And she was in a dig at Riddhi Vihara. And I was just so thrilled that to even think that I had maybe a little bit to do with that. So, yes, it was really interesting to meet women and just to sometimes see the curiosity in them. And, they're bold enough to ask you questions and think, okay, something different to what they're doing is possible. So that was really great.
And Amina, would a manuscript in a male pen or female pen make a difference to a publisher? Now, I'm not talking about Pereira Hussein here.
It's really funny, but I was reading an article that came out maybe a week ago, where there was before that, I will say Sam and I run a publishing house, and I was once very early on, editing a very macho writer. And I found anything I said, he didn't like. He wasn't willing to listen to anything I said. And basically, we would discuss the manuscript before. So I gave him up. I was so frustrated. I told Sam, you take him over. And they had a dream team, like if Sam said the same thing that I said, okay, Sam. He'll accept it. But there was a lot of resistance with me. So last week, I was reading this piece about a man and a woman who ran a PR company. And the man said that he realized his partner, the female partner, always had a tough time. And he would say, you're not handling it properly. He thought it was her approach. One time, her computer broke and she was using his computer, and she didn't realize all the emails were going out with his name. And she was getting these really nice emails back from difficult customers. Then she tweaked on and told the man, you write to your customers, don't even take mine, and put my name in. And he then realized that when he did that, there is just this difficulty. Who is she to tell me kind of thing. Whereas if a man says it, there is more, they might listen a bit better. But to go back to your original question, obviously there are writers who feel that they might not get a fair hearing if they write under their name. I mean, we have in this country people who have written under pseudonyms, and I don't know if you know about that case that a very well-known writer submitted a manuscript to the Grecian, and it was shortlisted. And when they realized who had sent it, they were really irate and really angry, because I felt he might have had a fair chance to win if they didn't know actually who he was. So there are all these, prejudices and biases that we all have. But I think maybe in publishing, people might use another name to be anonymous, perhaps. But I'm not sure. Or maybe if a woman wanted to write a war story, she might think that it's better to write it under a male pseudonym. If a man wanted to write a love story, he might write it under a female name, because you have all these stereotypes of who can write what. But then you have Nicholas Sparks.
Thaji, you've always maintained that gender equality is not about men being women trying to be the man or men trying to be female. It was a sort of a very balanced ecosystem, if I may call it that. Why do you think, you yourself, think that, women would do what they can do and men would do what they can do, but then there is that nice equilibrium that you come to? Why would you say that?
I think it's very much in the way that we train as dancers also. And I have to say, in the kind of 60 years of the company, the principal dancers have always been female. And it's not that we haven't had males in the company, but they have somehow been very supportive of us even as dance partners. There's this kind of connection that we build through the kind of training that we go. So I'm not just talking about technique. It's about, what we do even around the dance school, like from things like sweeping or making, tea for your teacher. Like a male would also come forward and do that because they know that as a dancer of the company, that's expected of them. So it's not like, oh, the females have to do that, we have to sweep the floor, So they would do that. And I have a dance partner who stitches, so he stitches all our costumes, so which I can't do. That's the kind of environment I have grown up in. So I suppose that's why I kind of feel there's that equilibrium in my workspace to a certain extent, which I'm very lucky to have.
Definitely final question. All three of you, very, very quickly. What would you say to those women who are too scared to take the plunge, who are in the creative arts because of societal norms and also cultural barriers? Layla?
Well, what can I say? I would say, first of all, you need the passion and you need to then, try to find a way to sort of, pursue it. Because it is very fulfilling at the end of the day, especially in our creative space when we are creative, without suppressing it. It's not easy for women. Fun fact, after 200 years, Amsterdam, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, is showcasing women artists in their honors gallery. And now, this is not just about Sri Lanka. This is all over the world. This is happening. But there's nothing wrong in us aspiring to have the best system in Sri Lanka. We can't be comparing ourselves to, oh, it's happening in Amsterdam, so why not here? Or it's happening somewhere else, why not here? I think it's always fantastic to aspire, for us to aspire for our country to have better systems. We can't keep comparing ourselves. So I think for women, it is great if you are able to pursue, your passion. And I know it comes out in different ways, even in your cooking and even in the way you keep house and maybe even the way you speak. But it is nice to sort of, be creative if you have the ability to do that.
Having, people like females like my, grandmother and my aunt, and who have broken all those social norms and just plunged into it. And I think for us, what has really worked in a way is also that everybody has very supportive husbands and partners, and so that has really helped us not think about anything else and just do what we need to do in one sense. But I think it's just about taking that risk. Yes, like Layla said, it's very difficult, and I mean, in the way we do it, it's financially, it is very difficult, and it's not a rosy thing to be in. But at the end of the day, when I dance, that's all that matters to me, and nothing else.
Amina?
So I think the creative art is not like any other job. And therefore, if you want to do it, you want to do it. If you can't do it, you will die. It's basically that kind of feeling. So if you are frightened, don't worry. There will come a time when that desire to create will be greater than your fear. And you will go ahead and do it. That 85-year-old author waited all that time. I don't know if she got any encouragement at home, but her daughters did. She waited till her daughters grew up, till they were in their 40s or 50s. And then she took the plunge. So we have, I hold your grandmother in great respect because she did things that nobody else did before. We have hardly any of us are pioneers anymore. That's one thing I have to be grateful for. There have been other people who have fought the battle, who have paved the way and made it easier. And as Layla said, in Sri Lanka soon, we won't be having these conversations because soon, maybe not as soon as we want, but it will happen.
We can ask one, I think. Just one.
This is going a bit back, Savi, and it refers to what Amina talked about being restricted culturally when she writes. So what I want to ask Thaji is similarly, when they started their dance, when they started the dancing, no one saw it as a Sinhala Buddhist dance form. But if it was created now under the current context, would they think of it as a nationalistic dance form?
Thaji?
Yeah. So actually, our dance form predates Buddhism. It's 2,500 years old, and it's only after Buddhism came in that people started associating it with the ritual. So before they began the ritual, they would take the blessings and start. But technically, if according to Buddhism we were to do things, we should not be dancing or singing. I think what we are trying to do as a company, I think for lots it does in a way because of the kind of ritualistic chanting that happens, that they feel that it is connected to Buddhism, but actually it's not. It's a lot to do with other gods, like regional gods, and so it's I think to break that is going to be very difficult, but it would also depend on how you present your work. And I think we as a company are very conscious of what we present in one sense, especially if it comes to religion. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Thaji. Thanks for the question, Shah. So once again, thank you, everyone. Just a surprise from Tharu, that is anyone who wants to dine here tonight will get a 10% discount, enjoying the ambience and, of course, the wonderful, amazing food and beverage that Tharu is renowned for. So thank you once again. I want to thank Cargills again for being our festival title sponsor, and to all our media friends who've been here and given us immense support. Please don't forget, Day 4 is also going to be, it promises to be exciting with our positive disruptors, 3 young women who have actually disrupted their spaces, and our comedy duo who have disrupted comedy in their own way and brought in social messaging through their comedy, Block and Dino. So thank you once again.